Hi, I'm Michael Shearer, and this is the true story of a walk with me and my son, who was 9 at the time, down the Camino de Santiago. It's called Walking a Rainbow, and this is chapter 7, entitled Finding Place. The path bent closer to the Rio Arga and crossed an old bridge and up to a road. 2 kilometres or so of noisy, smelly traffic. Hotter still here, as we had lost the cool presence of the river, and the road itself reflected the heat back up at us. We laboured, stunned by the heat, through Zuriane, until a welcome yellow directed us back to the river towards Iroth. By the bridge here was Claudio, in a swimming costume. He waved. "Hot today. Why don't you take a dip in the river?" Now that is an excellent idea. We walked along the bank a little to find a shady spot and shed our clothes. I laid my shirt, drenched with sweat, in the sun to dry. The water was deliciously cold, a touch of the high mountains. I lay in the healing, rippling, cool flow, and let the current gently massage and the chill penetrate. In contrast to the icy water, I slowly became aware of my own body heat, deep and warm, like the memory or a promise of sweet secret love. A brushing slither announced a passing fish over my chest and down my side, like a tender greeting, so sensuous. With my eyes just above the surface, I could see iridescent damselflies skimming the water, rainbows in their prismatic wings. Life, so sweet and subtle. I felt literally immersed in it and deeply content. On the bank I could see Claudio getting dressed. I stood and waded out. "I have to meet the film crew in Pamplona," he said. "We must spend tomorrow filming. I'll probably see you there." "Fine," I replied. It never occurred to me at the time that there might be any problem finding him in a city. "Tell me," I asked, "are there any dangerous creatures in the river here in Spain?" "Not usually, although I once put my hand down in the water and something moved under my hand. It was a water snake. I got out very quickly." "Are they dangerous?" "Some of them." So off he went. I watched him, slowly, patiently walking off, his long, thin, brown legs, and his gait like a camel's. The sweat on our clothes had dried already, leaving fringes of white salt. Kez was still cheerfully splashing about, so I took the opportunity to wash our clothes in the river. We carried 2 sets of clothes, each one on, one off, so there was always washing. I laid them down on the grass to dry and sat in the dappled shade and wrote some letters, updated the perennial notebook, then fixed some food, hot dogs and onions and sweet tea. Some time later, and much refreshed, we moved off back up the road at Thalbaldica, then into the landscape, as the river valley and the road swept off to our left. The path widened to some 9 or 10 feet of white, crumbly dust, as if the pulverizing sun had beaten out all colour. The scene opened out to a wide, fertile plain of wheat fields and dark poplars, and above an even wider, intense blue sky. Turning a corner to see the plain, that huge space, was like the first sight of the sea on childhood holidays. The spirit expands to fill the space it's in. Wide open space beckons the soul. as the sky does. The path looped around hillocks of dark pine forest gashed with fire breaks. We sweltered on, the path baked hard and shade scarce. In the heat we were already well used to scanning the landscape for shade. It was stupid and unthinkable to take a break in the open sun. Falling asleep could bring sunstroke. We classified shade according to its effectiveness. There was simply shade, technically shady but minimal, better than nothing, thin and maybe dappled. Then there was good shade, thicker and involving several trees or one large one. But best of all was deep shade, cool and refreshing, a female moony place of recuperation, Blake's Beulah, a healing, mending envelopment we descended into with gratitude. We became connoisseurs of shade as we were of water, for they are akin. So just as we stopped for the blessing of cool water whenever we happened upon it, so we often took the hint and the gift of deep shade, and took a break to allow its softness to work its magic and temper the fierceness of the brutal sun. "Well, unless we climb up to the forest, it looks like we're out of shade for a while," I commented. "Something may turn up," replied Kes. We ploughed on through the turgid heat until much later we found some moderately good shade and sank down for a rest amid a flurry of clouded yellow butterflies, their wings deep orange with dark brown tips as if burnished by the sun. Out in the bright light the ground was smitten with heat. The sparse grass was yellow and brown, although there was some scabious, cornflowers and thistles. Kes quickly fell asleep, and I sat alone amid the hum of flies. Eventually a young man in his mid-20s appeared on the path. He wore only a white vest, shorts and trainers, and was browner than my tea. He carried an alpine ski pole as a walking stick. I hailed him and asked him if it was useful when walking. It was, he said, but he kept dropping it. "Patrick," he told me, Belgian. "Are you going to Pamplona tonight?" he asked. "I don't know," I replied. "We just walk and look for somewhere to stay when it gets late. Are you going to Pamplona?" "Maybe, although I think I might stay with the nuns." "With the nuns?" "Yes, there's a refuge not far, run by nuns." He left. I let Kes sleep until the sun got low in the sky. Eventually we moved off, and each settled into their own pace until I reached a yellow arrow on a fence. It was a bit worn and unclear. Kes arrived. "What's up, Dad?" "Look at this yellow, Kes." "What's wrong with it?" "Well, it looks as if we are supposed to go over the fence. All this time so far we have never had to climb over anything. What do you think?" "It's a bit faded." "Looks like it's over the fence to me." "Okay, let's go." I started to heave myself up and climb the bars of the wooden fence. When I got down backwards on the other side and stuck back a little, I could see that Kes hadn't begun. "Come on, Kes, it's a bit awkward with the rucksacks, but it's not difficult." He didn't move, just stared into space. "I'll tell you what, take off your rucksack and hand it over the fence to me, then you can climb freely." He remained staring. "Come on, Kes, you can do it. It's not that high." "It's not that," said Kes thoughtfully. I was getting a little impatient. "Well, what is it then?" "It's the bull," he said firmly. I glanced over my shoulder. There, in the middle of the field, and advancing rapidly towards me, was what appeared to be a diesel locomotive with legs. "Bull! Bull!" I shouted, rushing towards the fence and climbing as fast as I could. Unfortunately, I caught my foot as I climbed, tipped over the top, performed a sort of bent handstand on the uppermost bar, did a vertical forward roll and landed flat on my back on the other side, my head towards the fence, looking up. "Oof!" I said, winded. "That was brilliant, Dad," said Kez. "Most people need a swimming pool to do that sort of thing." I gave him one of my looks. Meanwhile, the bull had arrived and was looking down at me over the fence as I lay on the ground. Its eyes protruded wildly, and its mouth was flecked with foam and blood. It clearly wanted very much to be on my side. It snorted a lot and stamped and pawed the ground. "He's not a happy bunny," I said. "No, Dad," Kez stated. "It's a bull." I got up and checked myself out. Right shoulder a bit bruised, otherwise all right. The rucksack had broken my fall. "Okay," I sighed. Onward. We took a long diversion around the field and soon reached another river, the Rio Althama, and a low stone bridge that ended in a stone round-headed arch over the path. This led straight into the ground floor of a plain rectangular building, so that the bridge and the building were all of a piece. Here, in the shade under the arch, was a double brown door with florid black cast-iron hinges, which included decorative dragons. Dragons are complicated, but they are essentially akin to snakes and fish in iconography. Another symbol of female power. Scaly animals, fire-breathing flying snakes that knights love to skewer with their phallic lances. And guardians of treasure. Some Greek temples were built over snake pits. The oracular priestess at Delphi was called the Pythia, from which we get Python. Delphi itself is named after a female dragon or serpent called Delphine, derived from a word meaning womb. There are Cretan sculptures, among others, showing priestesses holding snakes. Then there's Medusa, not to mention Eve. This must surely be the place. I knocked. A middle-aged nun opened the door. "Peregrinos," pilgrims, I said. "Do you speak English?" "No," she replied. "Do you speak Spanish?" "No," I answered, smiling. She beamed at me and sort of twinkled. It was an emotional iridescence, a flickering in the affective ultraviolet. So I beamed back and tried to twinkle too. She laughed heartily and gave us an enormous key and directed us around to the side door. The refuge was one long shady room that reeked of tranquillity. Heavy beams crossed the ceiling. Partitions were made with cork sheets producing several rooms. There was a lounge, male and female bathrooms, a kitchen, and several bedrooms of various sizes and capacities. "Wow, this is luxury," I said. "More like a pilgrim's suite than a refuge." The place felt so restful, I decided to take a nap, and I lay me down in the haven of peace, this womb-like space of warm, soft air. I dreamt. I liked the Greek and earlier Egyptian idea that a dream provides an initiation into the place where you sleep. It was a simple dream in which I was welcomed by a group of women. They stood as a small, excited, friendly little crowd of about 7 people. Their ages ranged from about 18 to around 50. They greeted me simply as an old and well-loved friend. There was much smiling and touching, embracing and kissing. The oldest, a matronly, big-bosomed woman dressed in warm shades of purple, orange and violet, her arms folded beneath her breasts, looked on and smiled in recognition, twinkling. "Well," she said, "you certainly took your time." When I awoke, I went off to find a supermarket to get some food. I let Kez choose. Then we stopped off for a quick drink in a bar. The walls were entirely decorated by Asterix cartoons. In the wood above Zubiri, Claudio and I had discovered a mutual admiration for Asterix adventures. I especially liked Obelix, the bumbling innocent, the open-hearted fool, whereas Claudio went for Getafix, the druidic sage, the Celtic magus. Claudio even looked a bit like Getafix and resembled him in his love of things Celtic and his esoteric knowledge. He was steeped in the Celtic and had travelled to Ireland several times. He even knew some Gaelic. He had spoken appreciatively in the cool wood of Galicia, the last province on the walk, and how it was lush and green and wet and magical, and quite unlike anywhere else in Spain. It reminded him of Ireland. Back at the convent, I took a shower and then went to the kitchen to cook. Patrick, the Belgian, was already there cooking. "Would you like to eat with me?" he said. "I've bought too much wine for one." "I'm always willing to help out a fellow pilgrim in difficulties," I replied. So we convivially chatted as we ate our lentils and ravioli and bread and cheese, plus red Rioja wine full of sun. Patrick, it turned out, was a driving instructor from Brussels, addicted to long-distance walking. A laid-back character who loved to be alone in wide spaces and walking fast. Afterwards, I went out in the cool evening and sat by the river for a last smoke. Reflections beneath the bridge lazily shimmered like a spell seeping through the air. The grey-stoned medieval bridge was festooned with greenery, while below it the olive river, highlighted with white flowers, imperceptibly flowed to a weir, so that the scene was imbued with the soft sounds of falling water. The light had become creamy, so that the orange sandstone and rich deep green vegetation and pastel blue sky, mirrored in the river, became a Cézanne composition. Frogs croaked like sheep with a death rattle.